Hi there, it's Friday the 10th of April 2020, and once again we are transporting ourselves back in time nearly 2,000 years to the week beginning Sunday the 29th of March 33 AD, when Jesus Christ, the Son of God, rode into Jerusalem on a donkey to be celebrated by the people as they waved the palm branches from the trees, a day that we know and celebrate today as Palm Sunday. On the Monday, he went back into Jerusalem again, this time to challenge those who were buying and selling in the temple courts instead of praising and worshipping God, and threw them all out in his wrath and anger, a day we know as Holy Monday. On the Tuesday, he confronted the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the Pharisees, trying to teach them the truth from the Word of God, but of course they were spiritually blind and could not see or hear or understand. On the Wednesday in Mark's Gospel, he does not record what happened that day. To us, it's Silent Wednesday. It's a day when Jesus was silently preparing his heart and mind for what was to come. On the Thursday, it was known today as Maundy Thursday, meaning the commandment to love one another, and Jesus showed his love as he washed his disciples' feet on that Thursday, in preparation for what was to happen, as they shared a last supper, as he went to Gethsemane and spent his last day on earth before he was to die on the Friday. And today we celebrate this Friday, that Friday, April the 3rd, 33 AD, to us as Christians known as Good Friday. Why in the world would the day that Jesus died be known as Good Friday? Well, for us it is a good day. For us, it is one of the best days. It is the day when Jesus died for our sin, for your sin, for the sin of all mankind. And we celebrate that day. So what happened on that day, that Friday? Well, very early in the morning it began when the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council, condemned him. Utterly condemned him and handed him over to Pilate to be crucified. The Sanhedrin condemned him. Pilate questioned him. Who are you? Are you truly the King of the Jews, as people say? He didn't understand who Jesus was, and he questioned him and couldn't find any reason to condemn him, as the Sanhedrin had done. So he asked the crowd if they wanted to have Jesus released to him, or did they want a known criminal, Barabbas, released to them. And of course the crowd shouted that they wanted Barabbas, and they shouted that Jesus, who was being given to him, offered to them, they wanted him crucified. So the Sanhedrin condemned him. Pilate questioned him. The crowd rejected him. And then the soldiers took him into the praetorium, the Pilate's palace, and they beat him. And they mocked him, and they put a staff in his hand pretending he was some kind of a king, a ruler. They put a crown of thorns on his head. They put a robe around him, and they blindfolded him, and they beat him, and they asked Jesus to prophesy and to tell who was beating him. The Sanhedrin condemned him. Pilate questioned him. The crowd rejected him. The soldiers beat him. And then Simon helped him. A man called Simon from a place called Cyrene was commanded by the Roman soldiers to help Jesus carry his cross. And he carried a part of the cross for Jesus as he was led up to the place of the skull, Golgotha, just outside the city gates where he was crucified. The Sanhedrin condemned him. Pilate questioned him. The crowd rejected him. The soldiers beat him. Simon helped him. And then the passers-by who saw Jesus on the cross, they hurled insults at him. If you are the Son of God, come down. You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well, prove yourself. Prove yourself as the Son of God then. Do what you said that you were going to do. And they mocked him and they hurled insults at him as they walked past him, seeing him hanging there in his agony. The Sanhedrin condemned him. Pilate questioned him. The crowd rejected him. The soldiers beat him. Simon helped him. The passers-by insulted him. And ultimately, God forsook him. As Jesus was hanging there, he shouted, having taken all the punishment of the sins of all the world upon him, as he had finished his work. And Jesus shouted in such a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Even God himself forsook his Son, as he could not stand to look at Jesus, full of sin, bearing the sin of the world, bearing your sin, bearing my sin. And Jesus breathed his last and died. The Sanhedrin condemned him. Pilate questioned him. The crowd rejected him. The soldiers beat him. Simon helped him. The passers-by, they insulted him. God forsook him. And then the centurion who was in charge of the crucifixion, amazingly, he honoured him. He said that surely this was the Son of God. The Roman centurion saw in Jesus, in the way that he died, that he was no ordinary man. And so he honoured him. Meanwhile, the women watched him. His own mother, Mary Magdalene and others, stood from a distance watching Jesus, watching him die. The Sanhedrin condemned him. Pilate questioned him. The crowd rejected him. The soldiers beat him. Simon helped him. The passers-by insulted him. God forsook him. The centurion honoured him. The women watched him. And finally, Joseph of Arimathea buried him. Wrapped Jesus in linen cloths. Placed him in his own tomb that had been reserved for his own death. And the stone was rolled over the tomb. And he was laid to rest. How can this be Good Friday? Listen tomorrow and Sunday, and you'll find out why.